The wind swept across the desert like an old song that had forgotten its words. Sun burned high, painting the sand and rocks in shades of gold and fire, and the air shimmered like a living thing. A line of dust curled in the distance, hoofbeats echoing softly through the canyon. By the time the sound reached the boy, he was already crying, clutching his scraped knees and wiping his tears on a sleeve too dirty to tell its color. He sat there, beside the dead mesquite, with a cut on his cheek and a welt on his arm. A stone lay near him, the last of many that had chased him from the settlement. "They threw stones at me because I'm different," he whispered, not knowing anyone was listening. His voice cracked like the dry earth beneath him. The boy's birthmark, dark, jagged, stretching across half his cheek, caught the sunlight like a burn.
Else?
The townsfolk said it was a curse, something bad carried from the day he was born. His mother told him it was just skin, nothing more. But people didn't see skin. They saw stories they'd already written in their minds. From the shadows of a saguaro, a figure moved tall, silent, wrapped in buckskin. With a long rifle slung over his shoulder and a band of red cloth tied around his forehead, he watched the boy for a moment, like a man unsure if what he was seeing was real or just another ghost of the desert. When he finally stepped forward, the crunch of gravel made the boy flinch and pull away. "Easy," the man said, his voice deep and calm, the way a man speaks to wild horses. "You're bleeding." The boy turned, wide-eyed, staring at the stranger. He'd heard stories about the Apache. Some said they were killers. Others said they were protectors of the land. The boy didn't know which to believe, but fear froze him in place. The man crouched down, his dark hair brushing his shoulders, the scent of dust and sweat rising from his skin. He tore a strip from his shirt and pressed it gently against the cut on the boy's arm. "Those who throw stones," he said slowly, "do not always know what they fear." The boy's lips trembled. "They said I shouldn't come back, that I scare their children." The Apache studied him, eyes narrowing slightly as if seeing something others could not. "Do you?" The boy shook his head. "Sir, I wanted to play. I didn't do nothing wrong." The man nodded and looked toward the horizon. "This land is full of people who think difference is danger," he said. "But sometimes what they call danger is only truth wearing another face." For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind rolled between them, carrying the smell of sage and dust. A hawk circled high above, crying out like a spirit calling home. "Where's your home?" the man finally asked. The boy hesitated. "They burned it, said it was cursed when Mama died. I've been sleeping near the old well." His eyes dropped to the ground. "I don't got nowhere else." Something flickered in the Apache's face, then a quiet recognition. The kind only those who've lost too much can share. He reached for his water pouch and handed it over. "Drink," he said. "The desert is no friend to the weak stomach." The boy hesitated, then took a sip. The water was warm but clean, and for a moment it made him forget the sting of his wounds. "Why are you here?" he asked, curious now. The man looked toward the mountains. "My people once walked this land. The soldiers drove us out, said it was not ours to keep. I come back to remember." His gaze hardened slightly, sometimes to remind them that we are still here. The boy blinked, unsure what to say. He noticed the rifle strapped across the man's back, the worn handle of a knife at his belt, and the scars that crossed his forearms like pale rivers. This was a man who had seen hard things. "You got a name?" the boy asked quietly. The man gave a half smile. "Names are for those who have someone to call them." The boy nodded, as if that made perfect sense. "Then maybe I'll call you Mr. Apache." A brief laugh escaped the man, low and short. "That will do." They sat in silence for a while. The desert stretched endlessly around them, alive in its emptiness. A dust devil twisted across the sand, disappearing into the brush. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled. The Apache studied the boy's face again, his eyes resting on the birthmark. "Do you know what that means?" he asked. The boy frowned. "They said it's bad luck." The man shook his head. "Among my people, such marks are given by the Great Spirit. I mean, you carry something strong inside. Maybe sorrow, maybe purpose. But never curse." The boy looked down at his hands, unsure if he believed it, but the words wrapped around him like a blanket. For the first time in days, he didn't feel completely alone. "Could teach you," the man said after a moment. "To track, to ride, to listen to the land." The boy's eyes widened, like an Apache. The man's gaze softened. like someone who belongs. The sun began to sink lower, painting the desert in amber and crimson. The two of them rose and started walking toward the distant hills. Every few steps, the boy glanced up at his new companion, still half afraid he might vanish like a mirage. Behind them, the small settlement shimmered in the heat hazes, people going about their lives, unaware that the boy they'd cast out was walking toward something greater than their narrow hearts could imagine. As the evening wind picked up, the Apache paused and looked back. His eyes caught the faint movement near the settlement, riders, 3 of them heading fast in their direction. He laid a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "Shh. You said they told you not to come back," he murmured. "Did you take something from them?" The boy hesitated, guilt flashing in his eyes. "Only the Bible from my mama's grave. They said I couldn't have it, but it's all I got left of her." The Apache's jaw tightened. "Then we best keep moving." The boy nodded, clutching the worn little book tighter against his chest. The Apache led him off the trail, down into a wash filled with dry reeds. Their footsteps vanished in the shifting sand. As they crossed into the shade of the canyon, the boy's small voice broke the silence. "Mr. Apache, will they come after us?" The man didn't answer right away. His eyes were on the sky, watching the vultures circling above the settlement. When he finally spoke, his tone was quiet, almost sad. "They already have." A shot cracked in the distance, echoing off the rocks. The boy jumped, clutching his arm. The Apache spun around, scanning the horizon. Another shot followed, closer this time, the sound bouncing like thunder between the cliffs. The man crouched low, motioning the boy down beside him. "Stay close," he whispered. "And whatever happens, don't drop that book." The boy nodded, heart pounding so hard it drowned the wind. The Apache's eyes narrowed as he spotted a flicker of movement atop the ridge, a glint of sunlight on metal. Exhaled slowly, pressing his hand to the earth. "They're hunting us," he said, almost to himself. The boy's lip trembled. "Why?" The man's gaze stayed fixed on the ridge. "Because you're different," he said, "and because you found someone who isn't afraid of that." The boy swallowed hard, tears mixing with the dust on his face. The Apache turned his head just enough to meet the child's eyes. "You said they threw stones?" he said softly. "Let's see how they fare when the desert throws back," as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. The sound of hooves drew nearer, echoing like drums of war. The boy gripped the Apache's hand. The man raised his rifle and whispered something in his own language, a prayer or maybe a promise. Then the wind shifted, carrying the smell of gunpowder. And the story of the boy with the birthmark and the Apache had truly begun. The first bullet struck a rock just inches from the Apache's boot, sending shards of stone and dust into the air. The boy gasped and ducked lower as the man steadied his rifle and scanned the ridge. He could make out 3 riders against the evening light shadows of men chasing ghosts across the desert. Their rifles glinted each time the sun broke through the clouds of dust. The Apache's voice dropped to a whisper. "We'll move when the wind shifts." He motioned toward a narrow cut in the canyon wall. "That path leads deeper into the hills. Stay close to the ground. Do not look back." The boy clutched the old Bible to his chest and crawled where the man led. The sand was hot, even under the fading sun, and every breath came dry and sharp. The shots stopped for a while, but the echo of them hung in the air like something alive. The Apache paused at every turn, reading the land the way other men read words. His eyes followed the trails of dust, the wind patterns, even the direction the birds flew. To the boy it seemed like magic, though the man never spoke of it that way. When they reached a cluster of boulders, the Apache stopped and sat down, pulling the strap of his rifle loose. The boy watched him in silence, afraid to break whatever thinking the man was doing. The only sound was the wind whistling softly between the rocks. After a long while, the man spoke. "The desert teaches you to listen before you move," he said quietly. "Those men think they can hunt through fear, but fear makes noise. It blinds them." He looked at the boy. "You must learn to be still, even when your heart is loud." The boy nodded. He wanted to say something brave, something that would make the Apache proud, but his throat felt tight. He looked down at the Bible again. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed. On the first page was a name written in faded ink. "That was my mama's," he said softly. "Used to read it to me before bed. Said there's always light somewhere, even if you can't see it. The Apache's gaze softened. Your mother was wise. He leaned back against the rock. My people say the same, only we use different words. We say the fire never dies. It only hides until you need it again. The boy studied him for a moment. Did your mama tell you that too? The man's jaw tightened slightly. My mother was taken by soldiers when I was young. She never came back. My father taught me what she would have said. The boy didn't know what to say, so he just sat closer, feeling the strange comfort of not being alone. The Apache's presence carried something steady, like the land itself, quiet but unbreakable. The wind picked up again, this time carrying a faint whistle through the rocks. The Apache's head turned sharply toward the sound. They're close, he said. We move now. They slipped through the narrow path, the boy's small feet stumbling over loose gravel. The Apache caught his arm each time before he could fall. Now, the deeper they went, the cooler the air became, the walls of the canyon closing around them. The Apache stopped again and knelt, pressing his hand against the dirt. They're tracking by hoof, he muttered. They'll think we kept north. If we go through the canyon, they'll lose the scent. The boy looked back, fear still shining in his eyes. Why do they hate me so much? The Apache glanced at him, his expression unreadable. Because you remind them of something they lost their own courage. People who live in fear must find someone to blame. Today it is you. Tomorrow will be another. The boy's shoulders slumped. I wish I could make them see I ain't bad. Don't waste your heart trying to change blind men, the Apache said softly. Just keep your path clean. Truth will find its way. They moved again, deeper into the maze of stone, until the sound of the riders faded behind them. When they reached a small cave, the Apache gestured for the boy to sit. Wait. We'll rest here. Night comes soon. The boy curled up near the entrance, still clutching the Bible. The Apache gathered dry grass and twigs, lighting a small fire that barely glowed but gave enough warmth to chase away the cold wind. For the first time since they met, the boy felt a touch of peace. He watched the flames dance, small and quiet, the shadows painting strange shapes on the canyon walls. Will they stop chasing us? Asked after a while. The Apache poked at the fire with a stick. Men like that don't stop until something makes them. But they're far from home now. The desert will test them before the night is over. The boy's eyes drifted to the man's face. How do you know the desert so well? I was born in it, he said. I know where it hides water and where it buries bones. I know which winds carry life and which carry death. His gaze lingered on the flames. It is a cruel teacher, but fair. It gives to those who respect it, and it takes from those who don't. The boy nodded slowly, though he didn't understand all of it. He could tell the man wasn't just talking about the land. There was something else, something older, heavier. You have a family, he asked. The Apache's eyes stayed on the fire. I said, they're gone now. Soldiers came at dawn, took the horses, burned the lodges. The land still remembers their screams. The boy swallowed hard, feeling a knot in his stomach. I'm sorry, he whispered. The man looked at him finally, his face calm, but his eyes carrying years of hurt. Sorry is for things you can change, he said quietly. The past cannot be undone. But the living must keep walking. Outside, the desert night fell fast. The stars appeared one by one, sharp and bright. Coyotes began to call in the distance. The boy shivered and pulled the blanket closer. The Apache leaned against the cave wall, rifle across his knees, eyes open even as his breathing slowed. The boy's voice broke the silence again. Mr. Apache? Yes. You think my mama can see me from heaven? The man looked toward the sky where the stars glowed like embers. If she loved you, she sees you. The ones who love us never truly leave. They walk beside us when the road grows dark. The boy smiled faintly and closed his eyes. Sleep took him slowly, and when he finally drifted off, the Apache watched him in silence. For the first time in many moons, something inside him stirred a feeling he thought had died long ago. By morning, the world was washed in pale gold. The Apache was already awake, crouched near the mouth of the cave, listening. The boy rubbed his eyes and sat up. What is it? He whispered. The man held a finger to his lips. Voices, he said. 2 men, maybe 3. They followed the trail after all. Fear rushed back into the boy's chest. What do we do? The Apache's eyes moved over the rocks. We'd lead them away. But first, you must hide. He pointed to a narrow crack in the wall behind the fire pit. "Stay there until I come back. No matter what you hear, do not move." The boy shook his head. "I don't want you to go." The man's expression softened. "I must. They want me more than they want you. If they find me, you'll have time to run." He reached out and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Remember what I told you, be still, when your heart is loud?" The boy nodded reluctantly and crawled into the narrow opening, clutching the Bible close. He could see the Apache from the shadows, a silent figure against the rising sun. The man walked out of the cave slowly, blending into the rocks until only his red headband marked his presence. Moments later, the boy heard footsteps, harsh voices, English words filled with anger. He couldn't make out everything, but he caught pieces. "That kid's got it. The mark. Preacher said he's cursed. Burn it out of him." The boy pressed his hand to his mouth to keep from crying out. His heart pounded so loud it hurt. Then came another sound, a sharp crack of a rifle. Then another. The men shouted, the echoes rolling through the canyon. The boy couldn't see, but he could hear boots scraping against stone, someone yelling in pain. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. Then silence. The boy waited, trembling. The silence stretched so long it felt like the world had stopped. Finally, a shadow appeared at the mouth of the cave. The boy held his breath, ready to run, but when the figure stepped into the light, it was him, the Apache. His shirt was torn, a scratch bleeding across his arm, but his eyes were calm. He knelt beside the fire, grabbed the boy's small hand and whispered, "They're gone." For now, the boy threw his arms around him without thinking. The Apache froze for a moment, then slowly patted the boy's back. "We'll go south," he said after a moment. "There's an old riverbed there. We can follow it to safer ground." The boy nodded, still holding on. As they stepped out into the open desert once more, the sun climbed high behind them. The land stretched wide and silent, yet it felt different now, like it was watching them, waiting to see what they'd do next. The Apache tightened the strap of his rifle and glanced at the boy. "The world will always test what's inside you," he said quietly. "But don't ever let them decide what you are." The boy looked up, dust streaked on his cheeks, eyes steady despite the fear. "I won't," he said. The Apache gave a small nod. "Then you'll make it." Behind them, the canyon lay still, holding the echoes of the fight. Ahead, the horizon shimmered, endless and uncertain.
Ow.
The desert wind rose again, whispering through the cactus and sagebrush, carrying their story forward into the unknown. The road south was rough and silent, marked by dry bones and thorn bushes that tore at their clothes. The Apache led the way, moving with the rhythm of the land, his steps soundless. The boy followed close behind, his small feet leaving prints in the sand that the wind quickly erased. The sun burned above them, cruel and steady, and every few miles the man would stop, kneel, and press his hand to the ground. He could tell things by the earth, how far a snake had slithered, how old a hoofprint was, and when danger was near. The boy watched every move, trying to learn without asking too many questions. By noon, they reached the edge of a dried riverbed. Few twisted trees grew there, their roots clutching the cracked soil. The Apache motioned for the boy to rest under the shade while he climbed a nearby ridge to scout the horizon. The boy sat down, breathing hard, hugging his mother's Bible close. The silence of the desert pressed heavy around him, broken only by the wind and the hum of distant insects. When the Apache returned, his face was darker than before. "They're still tracking us," he said quietly. "3 riders, maybe more. The desert hasn't stopped them yet." The boy's stomach turned cold. "Why won't they let me be?" "'Cause men like that think justice belongs only to them," the Apache said, adjusting the strap on his rifle. "They've carried hate so long it's become their food." The boy nodded but said nothing. The Apache could see the fear in him, fear mixed with confusion. He wanted to protect the boy, not just from bullets, but from the kind of hatred that poisons a heart. Yet he also knew the world had a cruel way of testing even the innocent. As the sun dipped lower, they started walking again, following the riverbed southward. The air grew cooler, and the colors of the desert deepened into red and gold. The Apache noticed the boy limping. Without a word, he stopped, lifted him onto his shoulders, and kept walking. The boy clung to him, too tired to speak, his head resting against the man's back. When they reached a small canyon that opened into a narrow valley, the Apache decided to stop for the night. He found a spring trickling between the rocks, a hidden treasure in the desert, and let the boy drink first. Remember this place, he said softly. Water is life. It's what keeps everything moving when all else is gone. They made a small fire again, careful to keep it low. The boy sat close, warming his hands. Mr. Apache, he said after a long silence, do you think those men will find us? The man stared into the flames. If they do, it'll be their last mistake. The boy swallowed. You've fought before, haven't you? The Apache didn't answer right away. Yes, too many times. I used to believe every fight made a man strong. Oh. But now I know strength isn't in killing. It's in knowing when not to. The boy thought about that. Then why don't we just tell them the truth? That I didn't do nothing? Truth doesn't matter to men who've already decided what they want to see, he said quietly. You'll learn that in time. The boy's eyes dropped to the Bible again. My mama said God watches everything. Maybe he'll help us. The Apache gave a faint nod. Maybe your God and mine are the same, only the names are different. They slept in turns. When the boy finally drifted off, the Apache sat awake, staring at the horizon. He could see faint campfire smoke far away. The riders had made camp too. He knew they would come at first light. In the morning, he woke the boy early. We move before the sun finds us. They packed their small things, just a canteen, a blanket, and the Bible, and started climbing out of the valley. The Apache moved fast, his senses sharp. Every gust of wind, every rustle of brush made him reach for his rifle. Around midday, they came across an old wagon, half buried in sand. The wood was gray, the wheels broken, and a rusted lantern still hung from its side. The Apache approached slowly, scanning for signs of life. Inside, he found old bones and a few scraps of cloth. He covered them gently with sand. Pioneers, he said. They tried to cross too late in the season. The boy stared at the bones, his voice trembling. Did they have children? Maybe, the Apache said. The desert doesn't choose who it takes. They kept walking, the boy now quiet and thoughtful. As they moved deeper into the canyon, the sound of hoofbeats echoed faintly from behind. The Apache stopped, listening. The riders were closer than before. Can't outrun them forever, he said. We need to turn the land to our favor. They left the main path and climbed toward a series of stone ridges. The Apache moved with precision, marking their tracks with care to mislead anyone following. When they reached a ledge high above the canyon floor, he motioned for the boy to crouch low. From there, they could see the three riders approaching, discovered men with rifles across their saddles. The Apache's eyes hardened. They're not lawmen, just hired guns. The boy peered over the rock. Who hired them? Likely someone from the town, he said. Someone who wants you gone. The boy clenched his fists. But I didn't do anything wrong. That's why they're afraid, the Apache said. Because you live in truth, and they don't. He studied the riders' movements, calculating. We'll wait until dark, then we move west. Hours passed slowly. The boy fought sleep, his heart pounding every time a horse snorted or a rifle clinked against metal. The Apache didn't move, his eyes locked on the men below. He was waiting for something, perhaps a sign from the land, perhaps courage from within. As dusk came, a sudden gust of wind stirred the sand, creating a veil of dust across the canyon. The Apache took it as a signal. Now, he whispered. Oh. They slipped down the ridge and moved quickly through the shadowed rocks. They hadn't gone far when a shot rang out. The boy fell flat, the bullet striking close enough to send dirt into his hair. The Apache grabbed him, pulling him behind a boulder. More shots followed, echoing through the canyon walls. They found us, the boy cried. The Apache loaded his rifle calmly. Stay down. He fired once, the sound splitting the air. One of the riders shouted, falling from his horse. The others took cover, returning fire wildly. The fight raged for minutes that felt like hours. When silence finally came, only 2 horses remained. The Apache didn't move until the wind carried no more sound. The boy trembled beside him. Did you get them? Not all, he said. The desert will finish what's left. They moved again, faster this time, the boy's fear turning into exhaustion. When they finally stopped, the stars were already out. The Apache led him into a hidden cave near the cliffs. Inside, faint carvings marked the walls, symbols of animals and circles. The boy ran his fingers along the drawings. "Who made these?" "My ancestors," the Apache said softly. "Long before any white man rode this land, they drew their stories in stone so they wouldn't be forgotten." The boy looked up. "Then we're safe here. For now," he said. "The spirits guard these walls." They built a small fire. The boy leaned against him, half asleep. "Why did you come back to this land?" he asked drowsily. The Apache's eyes flickered with memory. "Because I couldn't stay away from what was taken. My people are scattered, my village burned. But I remember every trail, every song of the wind. Sometimes I think the land calls to me, even when I try to ignore it." The boy yawned. "Maybe it called you to find me." The Apache glanced at him. Maybe it did. He stayed awake long after the boy slept. The firelight danced across the walls, casting the ancient carvings in motion. He could almost see faces there, his father, his people, all those lost to the march of time. He felt the old anger stir, the kind that burned quietly but never died.
Outside.
Coyotes howled again, closer this time. The Apache reached for his rifle and stood at the cave's edge. The night wind was cold, carrying more than the smell of sand. It carried footsteps. He could hear them faintly at first, then clearer. Someone was moving through the brush below. He turned back to the boy, still asleep, and whispered to the fire, "The desert tests us again." He crouched near the mouth of the cave. His rifle ready, eyes fixed on the darkness below. A shadow moved between the cactus, steady and slow. "Oh." Then another. Voices whispered in the wind, low and cautious. The Apache waited, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. He didn't know if they were men, soldiers, or worse. But he knew one thing: whatever came next would decide more than just their safety. It would decide whether this boy's difference would destroy him or save him. The fire cracked softly behind him, throwing one last spark against the stone. In that moment, he whispered a prayer in his old tongue, one only the mountains could hear. Then the first shadow stepped into the starlight, and the Apache raised his rifle. The boy stirred in his sleep as the wind carried the scent of danger into the cave, and the night around them held its breath, waiting for the next move. The Apache held his breath and stayed still as the shadows crept closer through the cactus and brush. The faint crunch of boots on sand broke the silence of the desert night. Moonlight stretched over the canyon, throwing long shapes across the ground. The boy stirred again in his sleep, whispering something too soft to understand. The Apache glanced back at him once, then turned his eyes forward. Whoever was out there knew how to move quiet but not quiet enough. He raised the rifle slowly, watching for the slightest motion. Then came a voice, a rough whisper in English. "He's up there. The kid too." Another voice answered, lower, tense. "Boss wants the boy alive. But the Indian, he don't care." The Apache's grip tightened on the rifle. There were at least 3, maybe 4 men. He recognized the tone in their words, the sound of men paid to do someone else's dirty work. His jaw clenched. The land was dark and open around them, no place to run, not without leaving tracks. He crouched lower and whispered to the fire, letting the flames die. In the faint light, he could see the boy's small face, calm and unaware of the danger closing in. The Apache felt something stir inside him again, a promise, unspoken but strong. He'd lost too much to let another innocent be taken by hate. First shot came sudden and sharp, sparking off the rocks near the cave mouth. The boy woke with a start and froze when the Apache's hand covered his mouth. "Quiet," he whispered. "Stay down." The second shot followed, then a third, closer this time. Dust rained from the cave roof. The boy's eyes were wide, fear turning his face pale. The Apache crawled to the edge and looked down. 3 men were spreading out below, rifles drawn. Their horses waited farther back, restless under the smell of gunpowder. "Get the Indian first," one shouted, "then bring the boy." The Apache fired once, the echo booming through the canyon. One of the men stumbled back, clutching his arm, shouting curses into the night. The others ducked behind rocks and fired upward, the air filled with smoke and dust. The boy covered his ears, trembling. "Listen to me," the Apache said, crawling back to him. "You run when I tell you. Follow the narrow path behind the carvings. It leads down to the riverbed. Don't stop for anything." The boy shook his head fiercely. "I won't leave you." "You will," the Apache said firmly. "I'll find you again." But if they catch you, your life is gone." The boy looked at him with tears in his eyes, but nodded. The Apache turned back, waiting for the wind to shift. He could feel the pulse of the land beneath him, the ancient rhythm he'd grown up knowing. The wind moved east, carrying dust into the faces of the men below. That was his moment. He stepped out from the cave mouth, his rifle steady, and fired twice. A scream echoed through the canyon. One man fell hard, his gun clattering across the rocks. The others scattered, shouting for cover. The Apache moved like a shadow, his body low, his breath calm. Each step was deliberate, guided by years of knowing how to survive. Behind him, the boy crawled through the small passage, clutching the Bible close. The tunnel was narrow, scraping his shoulders, but he kept moving until he reached the other side. Moonlight spilled through a crack, showing the dry riverbed below. He hesitated for a moment, then heard another shot echo through the canyon and knew he had to go. He slid down the rocks, scraping his hands, landing hard in the sand. The Apache stayed above, covering him. One of the remaining men spotted the boy's movement and shouted, "There, the kid's running." A rifle fired. The bullet missed, but struck close enough for the boy to stumble. The Apache's answer came fast. One clean shot that sent the man spinning into the dust. Only one rider remained now, shouting curses into the dark. The Apache crouched low, listening. The last man wasn't firing. He was circling. He was smarter than the others. The sound of hooves moved around the canyon wall, faint but steady. The Apache's eyes narrowed. The rider was trying to flank him. The Apache waited, counting the rhythm of the steps. When the horse came into view, he fired, but the rider ducked low and returned fire, the shot grazing the Apache's shoulder. He winced but didn't cry out. Blood ran warm down his arm, but his eyes stayed sharp. The rider turned his horse, ready to charge again. Below, the boy had made it to the riverbed, his small figure almost lost in the shadows. He stopped and looked back, clutching his mother's Bible. He could see flashes of light from gunfire and hear the echo of the fight. His heart hammered in his chest. He wanted to run back, but the Apache's words echoed in his head, "Stay alive." He dropped to his knees beside the old rocks, whispering a prayer. "Please, don't let him die," he said softly. "He saved me when no one else would." Above, the Apache steadied himself against the canyon wall, reloading the rifle with shaking hands. His vision blurred from pain, but his focus never broke. The rider came again, firing wild. The Apache waited until he saw the faint glint of the man's belt buckle in the moonlight. Then he fired. The bullet struck true. The rider fell from the saddle, his horse bolting into the dark. The desert went silent again, broken only by the echo of the shot fading into the distance. The Apache stood there for a moment, breathing hard, the wound in his shoulder throbbing. He knew it wasn't over. These men weren't the kind to ride alone. Whoever had sent them would send more. The boy wasn't safe yet. He climbed down toward the riverbed slowly, careful not to leave blood where it could be tracked. When he reached the bottom, he found the boy waiting just as he'd told him not to. The child ran to him and threw his arms around his waist. "I thought you were dead," he said, his voice shaking. The Apache rested his good hand on the boy's head. "I told you I'd find you." He looked around the empty canyon. "We can't stay here. More will come when the sun rises." The boy looked up at him, eyes full of fear and something else, determination. "Then we keep walking," he said. "The land gives to those who respect it." The Apache almost smiled at that. "So it does." They began walking west, where the land rose toward the high cliffs. The stars watched them from above, cold and clear. Every sound felt louder. Now the crunch of sand, the creak of the rifle strap, the whisper of the wind. After a long silence, the boy spoke. "Who sent them, Mr. Apache? Why would anyone want me dead?" The Apache didn't answer right away. He stared ahead, his eyes scanning the dark. "The same people who burned your home," he said finally. "Fear makes men cruel, and someone in that town, someone with power, wants to keep that fear alive." The boy frowned. "But why?" The Apache's voice was low. "Because your birthmark scares them. They think it means something bad. But it doesn't. It means you carry something they can't control." The boy looked at him, unsure. "Do you mean?" "You'll understand when the time comes," he said. "Right now, we need to stay ahead of them." As they climbed the ridge, A cold wind blew through the canyons. The Apache stopped suddenly and knelt, touching the ground. His fingers came away wet not with water, but with the faint trace of blood, fresh blood. He rose slowly. "They're not far," he said. "Others have come." The boy's breath caught. "What do we do?" The Apache scanned the cliffs above. "We lead them where they can't follow." They followed the trail up into the higher ground, where the rocks grew sharp and the air thin. The Apache's wound bled freely now, staining his sleeve. The boy noticed but didn't say a word, just kept close, his small hand gripping the man's belt so he wouldn't fall behind. The path narrowed, and the sound of horses echoed from below. Torches flickered in the darkness, at least 6 riders this time. The boy glanced back, eyes wide. "They found us," he whispered. The Apache looked down at him, his expression calm despite the pain. "Then the land will decide who stays." He moved them into a narrow cut between the rocks, a hidden trail that wound upward. The riders' torches moved closer, lighting the canyon floor below. The Apache could hear their shouts, angry, desperate, full of the same hate that had haunted this land for years. They climbed higher until they reached a plateau overlooking the valley. The Apache turned and looked down. From up there, the riders looked like insects crawling across the sand. He set his rifle down and took a deep breath. Stars shimmered above them, cold and endless. The boy tugged his sleeve. "Will they stop if we tell them the truth?" The Apache shook his head slowly. "Truth means nothing to those who've traded their hearts for fear." He crouched beside the boy and pointed toward the horizon. "See that line of black? That's the mountain range. Beyond it, the desert ends. There's a river there. Freedom waits beyond it." The boy stared at the dark outline, hope and fear mixing in his chest. "Can we make it?" The Apache met his eyes. "We'll have to." The sound of hooves grew louder below. Torches were climbing fast, their light reflecting off the canyon walls. The Apache raised his rifle again, his jaw set. The wind whipped through his hair, carrying the faint cry of coyotes. He turned to the boy one last time. "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." The boy nodded, gripping the Bible tight against his chest. Below, the riders began to spread out, their voices echoing up the canyon. The Apache could see their shapes now armed, determined, driven by something darker than justice. He took aim, the barrel steady despite the pain in his arm. The boy held his breath as the first rider came into view. The world seemed to hold still. The desert waited. The wind stopped moving. Even the stars seemed to dim. Then the Apache fired. The sound tore through the night like thunder. The battle for their freedom truly began. The first shot echoed across the desert like thunder. The flash of fire from the Apache's rifle lit the ridge, and for a heartbeat everything froze. The boy, the riders, even the wind. Then chaos returned. Gunfire cracked from below, bullets splintering the rocks around them. The Apache dropped to one knee, firing again and again, his every shot clean and deliberate. The boy stayed crouched behind him, clutching his mother's Bible so tight his knuckles turned white. The riders spread out below, shouting, their torches blazing like angry stars against the canyon walls. Dust rose from the horses' hooves, and the sound of gunfire bounced from one cliff to another until it felt like the whole land was roaring. The Apache moved with calm precision, reloading between bursts of fire. Every movement carried the weight of years of fighting, surviving, and losing. The boy tried not to cry, but tears burned his eyes. "Mr. Apache, they're too many," he whispered. The Apache didn't answer. His face was steady, eyes locked on the movement below. He fired again, taking down a rider who had climbed too close to the ridge. "The land chooses who stands," he said quietly. "And we're still standing." The boy didn't fully understand, but he held on to those words like they were armor. The riders below grew restless. Some shouted to retreat. Others yelled to keep advancing. Then a single mantle, broad-shouldered, his coat flapping in the wind, stepped forward on foot. His voice carried clear across the canyon. "You can't run forever, Apache," he shouted. "Give me the boy, and maybe I'll let you live." The Apache's eyes narrowed. He recognized that voice. Years ago, it had belonged to a man in uniform, a man who had led the burning of his village. The man had aged, but his hatred hadn't. He lifted his rifle and called back, "You've already taken enough lives. Leave him be." The man laughed. "That boy's marked by the devil himself. You think saving him will change that? The Apache's voice rose, calm but fierce. He's marked by the same creator who made this desert. And that's more than you'll ever understand. The man raised his hand, signaling his men. Gunfire erupted again, louder than before. The Apache fired back until the barrel of his rifle glowed faintly in the moonlight. Then he turned to the boy. "It's time to go," he said. "When I tell you, run for the mountain path. Don't stop until you reach the river." The boy's lip trembled. "But what about you?" The Apache's expression softened for the first time that night. "The land still has use for me." He placed a hand over the boy's shoulder. "Go live. That's how you honor those who died for you." The boy's heart twisted, but before he could argue, the Apache gave a sharp whistle. The riders looked up, startled, as a blast of dust and sand whipped through the canyon. The wind had changed again, strong and fast, swirling around them like the earth itself was fighting back. "Now," the Apache shouted. The boy ran, his small legs pounding the ground as he followed the narrow path up the ridge. Bullets struck the rocks near him, throwing sparks, but he didn't look back. He could still hear the Apache's rifle behind him, each shot slower, heavier. Then came a silence that felt like the world was holding its breath. He reached the top and turned. Below, the fires burned low, and the shapes of the riders blurred in the dust. The Apache was gone from sight. The boy called his name once, but the wind swallowed his voice. He kept moving, climbing down the far side of the ridge until he reached the low valley, where a faint ribbon of water glimmered under the moonlight. He stumbled to the edge of the river, falling to his knees. His chest ached, his throat dry, but he could hear the water running softly, a sound of life in the middle of all that silence. He opened the Bible and pressed his hand against the first page where his mother's name was written. "We made it, Mama," he whispered. Behind him, a shadow appeared at the edge of the ridge. The boy turned fast, fear gripping him, but it was him. The Apache was limping, his arm bleeding, his rifle slung low. His face was pale, but his eyes still burned with the same quiet strength. The boy ran to him and helped him sit by the water. The Apache let out a low breath, half pain, half relief. "You listened," he said. "That's good?" The boy nodded, his face streaked with tears and dust. "I thought you were gone." "Not yet," the Apache said. "The land wasn't finished with me." They rested by the river until the first light of dawn touched the canyon walls. The boy washed his face, the water cool and clear. The Apache tore a strip from his shirt to bind his wound. "They won't come this far," he said. "The desert will bury their trail." The boy looked at him, hesitant. "What will we do now?" The Apache stared at the rising sun. "We keep walking. There's a small camp west of here. My people sometimes pass through it. Maybe they'll still remember me. Can I come with you?" the boy asked. The Apache studied him for a long moment. "You can. But only if you understand one thing. The world will always look at you and see what they fear. That's their blindness, not yours. Don't carry their hate. Carry truth instead." The boy nodded slowly, like Mama said. "There's always light somewhere." The Apache gave a faint smile. "Yes, you just have to walk far enough to find it." They followed the river west. Days passed, the land changing from red sand to softer earth. They found cactus fruit, wild roots, and once even a stray goat that had wandered from some distant ranch. The Apache taught the boy to read the sky, to track by the shape of the wind, and to listen for the small sounds, the ones that meant life. At night, they sat by small fires and shared stories. The boy talked about his mother, how she sang even when the world was cruel. The Apache spoke of his people, how they once believed every person carried the spirit of the land within them. "That's why we protect it," he said. "Because it's a piece of us." The boy looked up at him. "Then maybe I've got a piece of it too." "You do?" the Apache said. "You proved it." Weeks later, when they reached the edge of the high plains, the Apache stopped and looked out at the horizon. Smoke rose faintly from the distance of camp. "That's where you'll be safe," he said. The boy frowned. "Aren't you coming?" The Apache placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'll see you there. But I have to speak with the land first." The boy didn't fully understand, but he saw in the man's eyes that this was a goodbye of sorts. He nodded slowly. "You kept your promise," he said softly. "You found me when nobody else would." The Apache looked at him, his voice quiet. "The land brought us together for a reason. It'd be so you could learn that difference isn't a curse, it's a gift. The mark you carry is proof of life, not shame. The boy's eyes filled again, but he stood tall, just like the Apache had taught him. I'll remember. The man nodded once, turned, and began walking back toward the canyon, his shadow long against the morning light. The boy watched until he disappeared behind the rocks. When he reached the camp hours later, kind hands welcomed him. They fed him, gave him water, and listened to his story. Some didn't believe it, others smiled and said, "The desert still keeps its miracles." Years passed, and the boy grew into a man, carried the same Bible his mother had given him, worn now but never lost. He built a small home near the river, where he and the Apache had once rested. Sometimes at night, when the wind whispered through the reeds, he could still hear that deep, calm voice saying, "Be still when your heart is loud." He never saw the Apache again, but word spread of a lone figure who roamed the borderlands protecting lost travelers and wounded souls. Some said he was a ghost. Others said he was a man blessed by the land itself. The boy never tried to prove which was true. He didn't need to. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the river glowed gold, he sat outside and traced the birthmark on his cheek. It no longer felt like something to hide. It was a reminder of survival, of kindness, and of the man who had stood against hate with nothing but courage and truth. He looked toward the horizon, where the desert met the sky, and whispered a simple prayer for the mother who taught him hope, and for the warrior who taught him strength. The wind stirred softly, carrying with it a faint voice, warm and steady. He kept walking. The boy, now a man, smiled. "Did," he said. The desert was quiet again, but not empty. It held their story, written not in words, but in the tracks of two lives that had crossed when the world needed it most. The land, vast and timeless, kept their memory alive, an Apache and a boy with a birthmark, bound forever by the truth that being different was never a curse, but the beginning of something greater.